Hello and welcome to Book of the Mouse Club, episode 45, Wednesday, August 19th, 2020.
Morning, monsieur.
Where are you off to?
The bookshop. I just finished the most wonderful story about a beanstalk and an ogre and
That's nice. Marie! The baguettes! Hurry up!
I'm sorry, but how can one possibly pay attention to a book with no pictures in it?
My dear child, there are a great many good books in this world without pictures.
I almost bounced clear out of the book. Some bouncing, huh?
Come home or make myself known.
J. Thaddeus Turtle, Esquire. Have you never met him? You will find his story in this delightful little book, The Wind and the Willows.
I've come to return the book I borrowed.
Finished already?
Oh, I couldn't put it down. Have you got anything new?
Welcome back. I'm your host, Courtney, and I sure am glad to have my co-host, Emily, along with me.
Hey, Courtney, I couldn't be more glad to be here today. I'm also really glad for our podcast community because it brings us a lot of positivity and also connects us with friends from other podcasts.
Yes, today we are extra glad to be joined by a special guest reader to round out the end of our summer cinema series, live action and literary classics. Joining us today is Jeremey of the Mad Chatters podcast, one of our favorite podcasts and largely responsible for our own podcasting journey. The Mad Chatters have been chatting away about all things Disney for over 5 years. Their show is known for its fun and original Disney trivia games, honest reviews of dining and experiences, and a love of diving into Disney history and theming. We've been lucky enough to appear together on a game episode, and I've joined them for quite a few topics myself, so we're so excited to have one of the chatters chat with us today. In addition to appearing regularly on his own show, you've likely heard him in the Extended Universe of Disney podcasts as a frequent guest on Disney Coast to Coast. Welcome, Jeremey.
Ladies, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I have my reading glasses on. The library is open because reading is fundamental.
Jeremey, we're super excited to have you here, and we recognize there's likely some overlap between our listeners and yours since we credit your show with giving us the podcasting bug. But for those who may be unfamiliar, can you take a moment to introduce yourself, your love of Disney, and the Mad Chatters?
For sure. My name's Jeremey, as you said, and I grew up in the Midwest outside of St. Louis, where, like most children of the late 80s and early 90s, I watched every Disney film that was released on VHS and borrowed them from my friends and neighbors, and also watched the Disney Channel. So I got bit by the Disney bug really young, but it really didn't stick until I went to Walt Disney World for the first time in 2007. I was in college. And my best friend, Derek, who I podcast with on the Mad Chatters, and my other good friend, Matt, we all went together. And pretty much from there, it was over. I was a Disney addict. So fast forward all these years later, I'm living in Orlando, spending way too much time and money at the theme parks, and just living my Disney life.
Well, we're glad to have you as part of our Disney life, too. I'm pretty sure we invited you to join us for this episode, really early this year, maybe February, when we were kind of tossing around the idea of, a fun summer series. This was, of course, before the current pandemic that we're enduring, so it's crazy to think that now we're here rounding out this series. For guests who may be just tuning in, this is actually the final installment of our summer cinema series, focusing on live action and literary classics. In June, we sailed to Treasure Island, and in July, we dove deep into 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Well, we're out of the ocean now and into the 20th century. So, Emily, would you care to share what you've learned about the history of our topic today, which is Pollyanna?
Okay, so a little bit about the author, the book, and some fun facts about its legacy. So author Eleanor Porter was born in 1868 in Littleton, New Hampshire. She grew up and lived in New England, and like Walt Disney, was very sentimental about her hometown, which served as the backdrop of many of her novels, especially Pollyanna. In all, Porter published 15 novels and over 200 short stories, but Pollyanna is what she is most remembered for writing. Pollyanna is Porter's sixth published novel, published in 1913. Pollyanna is a story about a young orphan who moves east to live with her aunt. Pollyanna's greatest quality is her ability to find happiness in even the most dire situations. And along the way, we learn of love triangles, crutches, and lady aid societies. By the end, her stern Aunt Polly, Mr. Pendleton, Dr. Chilton, and the entire proper New England town all soften and grow in response to Pollyanna's kindness and her glad game. Pollyanna was an immediate success, selling over 1 million copies in the U.S. and Europe in its first year. By Porter's death in 1920, there had been 47 printings of the book. That is a lot of books in 7 years. Due to its success in 1915, Porter published a sequel, Pollyanna Grows Up. In 1960, the story was adapted into a Broadway production called Pollyanna Whittier, the Glad Girl, with 112 performances in the historic Hudson Theater in New York City, written by Catherine Chisholm Cushing and produced by George C. Tyler and Claw and Erlanger, starring Helen Hayes. In 1920, the novel was adapted for the first time for the big screen and starred Hollywood's first real starlet, Mary Pickford. The novel again was adapted for the screen in 1960 by the Disney Studios, and we're going to talk about that one later. So its legacy. Her book inspired many things that include the contemporary use of the word glad. Pollyanna has been added to the dictionary as a word, and the name has been adapted and used in several contemporary ways. So first, there were glad clubs that opened, gatherings of people who came together to play the glad game, to cope with life through optimism. They were fleeting, but they were a thing, and one recently was cited as existing as early as 2008 in Denver, Colorado. My family, I guess, whenever I ask people this, I'm in the minority, but my family always calls our blind gift exchange a Pollyanna, which is a reference to the story that she doesn't know what she gets in her missionary barrels. A lot of people call it a white elephant. My family always called it a Pollyanna, so that name comes from this book as well. Some people have referenced a Pollyanna syndrome, or calling someone a Pollyanna means they are someone overly optimistic. Although I found this in my research, Porter is quoted in an interview that her intention was never that Pollyanna was blindly optimistic. She was just a child who looked for the good in every situation. But some people have taken it to that extreme that Pollyanna is very naive and her optimism is excessive to that point. The word was used in this way, can be traced back to 1930, George and Gershwin, their song, But Not For Me. And I believe Judy Garland did a cover of that song. The quote, when you look for the bad in mankind, expecting to find it, you surely will, appears in the Disney version. We're going to talk about this later, about that quote and how it's been misattributed to Abraham Lincoln. However, the original quote is in the book where it appears without any attribution whatsoever. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. That quote actually has a really fun story. I'll get to that when we talk about the movie. In his State of the Union address in 1973, Richard M. Nixon quoted using the word Pollyanna when he said, "I believe there's always a sensible middle ground between the Cassandras and the Pollyannas. We must take our stand upon that ground." And then finally, for more contemporary or Nintendo game fans, in Super Smash Bros., the game has a song in its soundtrack called Pollyanna, I Believe in You. So the word and the title Pollyanna has been used greatly since the publishing of this book. And today you can visit Pollyanna in Littleton, New Hampshire. The author and the character are honored in the town with a statue in front of the public library. Littleton also hosts a festival known as the Official Pollyanna Glad Day every summer. Also, if you love Pollyanna as a character, you can continue to read the Glad book series. After Porter's first 2 Pollyanna novels, several authors have taken up the mantle to expand Pollyanna's story, and there are now over 14 Glad books in the series. So lots of stuff. This has a lot more legacy than I ever realized from this book. So going in, had either of you read this prior? What's your familiarity with the story of Pollyanna?
I actually didn't have a lot of familiarity. I knew it was a Disney film, and we'll talk about my earlier attempts at watching that when we get there. Just kind of was aware of it, as you said, in the pop culture sense. I think most predominantly being called a Pollyanna myself. I feel like in high school I was really known for my positive outlook, my cheery disposition, so kind of used in a pejorative way, but I own it. I guess I'm a bit of a bit of a Pollyanna, but I had not read the book, so I was excited to be able to do so for this episode. What about you, Jeremy?
Very unfamiliar with this. In fact, I don't even think I knew it was a book. But if I had to guess it was a book, I'd be like, oh yeah, of course it's a book, because all those 60s Disney films were books at one time. It's just the way it was. I also kind of get this confused with like Pippi Longstocking and Heidi, and to me, like all these like orphan girl stories all kind of run together.
Anne of Green Gables.
Yeah, it's just like an orphan girl who's mistreated, but she's positive, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, one in a million. And not to disparage, Miss Porter or anything in her talents. So for me as a boy growing up, this did not appeal to me really at all.
I'm completely in the same boat. I only knew of the film. My grandmother, when you're raised with your grandparents, you watch a lot of old films. And this was one in her lineup. Every couple months she would change. She would watch like the same 6 films for like 2 weeks straight and then change it up. And this was one of those. So I remember watching it a handful of times when it was in her movie lineup. But other than that, it's escaped my memory. I think it's been about 12 or 15 years since I've actually watched it. And I also had no idea, Jeremy, like you said, that it was a book, but it makes sense that it was a book. So doing this research and all of these places where people have used the word Pollyanna and how it's been integrated kind of into our language, as well as GLAAD clubs, this just took me by surprise of how influential this story is beyond just what Disney did.
Well, speaking of GLAAD clubs, it's almost like we have one here today. As we've alluded to very often in our overuse of the word GLAAD, the story features the GLAAD game. This game is where when you find yourself maybe in an unhappy situation, you try to find the best in it. And it can get a little competitive if you're in a bit of a deeper, darker situation. For example, started out, Pollyanna explains that her father invented the game when she was wishing for a doll, but they received crutches in the missionary barrel instead. And her father suggested that she should be glad that she didn't actually need those crutches. And, I wouldn't say we're feeling down at the moment, but I like that it's a good outlook to have. So I would love to play the GLAAD game with both of you. What's something that you guys are glad about today?
Well, in today's unprecedented times in which we're all in this together, I mean, this definitely resonated reading this during the pandemic, because it's certainly, there's always somebody worse off than you. And I really think that's like the heart of the GLAAD game, is that no matter how bad it is, it could always be worse. So rather than focusing on the fact that it's bad, think about the way that it's good. So, if you're unemployed or you're furloughed, as I currently am, it's nice to think, well, at least there's safety nets. Could be worse. I could be homeless, could not be able to afford food, those kind of things. So we'll get into this, I'm sure. As obnoxious as I find this sort of mentality to be at times, I understand the root is pure.
Absolutely.
Along those lines, I'm really glad that even during these times, I'm currently on vacation. There are ways to still go on vacation during a pandemic. I'm at the beach with my family, and we've found a way to come to the beach safely and be able to stay within our little house and our picked spot on the beach that we carve out away from the rest of the crowd. So I'm really thankful that I'm still able to keep this family tradition this year, and found ways to do it safely.
I'm glad that podcasts like this bring us together. I feel like we've had quite the output over the past several months. I've checked a lot of books off of my personal reading list with extra time on my hands, staying at home and including this book. So it's been good to have that time and to be able to still connect virtually as we are today.
That was a good round of the GLAAD game, guys. I'm proud of us.
So what do you guys think of being glad as a moral of the story, either good or bad? And are there any other lessons you think Eleanor Porter was trying to add in this book?
I wasn't really picking up any other lessons. I really think the GLAAD was really driven home on this one. The amount, I would love to have done a word count of how many times the word GLAAD is used in her book. Um, I think overall it can be good, but like I said in my research where she had to be quoted that the way some people have read this book is that Pollyanna can be blindly optimistic to excessive points of being naive about the realities of the real world in some situations. Overall, I think she was going for the good, but I can see where people have read it to be overly excessive in Pollyanna's case. But I think you have to remember it is a child. So through a child's eyes, I think it's a nice moral of if a kid can find a way to be happy, we can also try to find a way to be happy.
In
what do you think, Courtney?
These current times, I feel like the idea of toxic positivity has been tossed around, but I don't necessarily think that this book falls into that, but I did have that at the back of my mind because, as you said, it gets reiterated over and over, but I think you make a good point that it's for children, though there is another lesson, or I guess maybe moral or something instilled in Eleanor's writing that I found very progressive, I think, for its time period. There's a little boy in the story, Jimmy Bean. I keep wanting to say Jimmy Dean, but that's a breakfast sausage. So catch me if I'm wrong there. But he's a friend of Pollyanna's, and he's an orphan. He's kind of about to grow out of the orphanage, and she herself is an orphan, but was fortunate enough to be taken in by her Aunt Polly. She wants to find a home for him. So she goes to the Ladies' Aid Society, which I guess is kind of like a homemakers group affiliated with the church. You know, they try to do good in the world. So she thinks, oh, this is the perfect group to help Jimmy out. And she goes to kind of like pitch the case on his behalf and share that, you know, maybe they could take him in or help support him, find him a home. But they end up chatting amongst themselves, and they say that, well, our money is put aside to send to these orphans in India. And I just found it was interesting that in a way Eleanor kind of criticizes that they're putting all of their money and their efforts into supporting this other country when there's people very much at home who need their help. So aside from the God game, I just thought that was a moral piece that was a little unexpected and progressive.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, I grew up in a church where my pastor was fired from a different church back in the 1960s for something that kind of similar to that, where basically he said to a very rural church in South Carolina in 1960s how much of a shame it was that they put so much effort into reaching the black man across the ocean, but not the black man across the street. And I think that's kind of the same vein that she was going for there, is that, you know, it's easy to think of people over there and to have a bleeding heart, but it's harder when it's personal. So good thought. As far as the GLAD game goes, and I'm so glad you said toxic positivity, because that crossed my mind so many times reading this book. And I get it's for children, and I get that it's oversimplified for a reason. But in today's world where we have that sort of constant think positive mentality, it can be a little toxic is a good word for it. It's okay to experience emotions that are not always positive. It's not okay to stay in those emotions and to live in those emotions, but it's okay to feel them and express them and to work through them. And that was kind of my biggest critique of the message is, don't ever think about anything negative. Always think about positive in every situation. And sometimes the negative is what we use to find the positive. It very much an Inside Out moment for me. If you remember the end of that film, where in order to truly understand joy, she had to experience sadness. And I think Pollyanna kind of misses that point, but maybe that wasn't her point 100 years ago.
I feel like there's a little bit of growth toward the end, but just on that toxic positivity note, I feel like it was just at the front of my mind because it's something that I've recognized in myself and tried to like check myself and be like, it's okay to feel sad, very much Inside Out. So I think that's why it was top of mind for me. But I feel like at the end, I appreciated that Eleanor gives Pollyanna the chance to feel sad, we're just going to put the spoiler warning out there. At the end of the book, Pollyanna ends up paralyzed and she can't move her legs, so she's very understandably sad and depressed about that. The town rallies together to kind of show how the Glad game changed their life. But I think that is a bit of growth in a sense that, like, oh no, Pollyanna was sad. Like, at least she wasn't just like, oh, I can't walk, but at least something.
She even reconciles in the book. She says when Pollyanna, I think it's Nancy, is trying to explain to Aunt, I'm trying to play the game with her, but Pollyanna says, it was easy to play the game with Mrs. Snow. I wasn't the one in the bed. So I think it also dawns on Pollyanna, like a growth moment, that playing the Glad game, the whole book, she's saying, it's easy if you just try, but sometimes it's not until you're on the other side that you realize how difficult it can be sometimes to be happy, which is also a little surprising considering she lost her parents and had to move away from her hometown. I thought maybe she would have been in that place already. But again, this might have been that coping mechanism that really pulled her through until something more tragic, maybe to a child's eyes, of not being able to run and play. But I thought it was interesting too that Porter put that in, that she recognizes it's hard to be glad all the time, particularly when you're the person that's working through something difficult. So moving through, did you guys have any favorite parts of the story? Any favorite, least favorite characters?
For me, I actually really liked the character of Nancy. She's Aunt Polly's kind of like maid assistant throughout the house. I liked seeing Pollyanna through her eyes. Like, she really takes to her right away and the game and kind of becomes an ally to Pollyanna in that regard. And my least favorite character, I didn't like Aunt Polly because she's so mean. But by the end, expectedly, she has a heart and she grows. I'm just like, man, like, this girl just lost her dad. She already lost your sister, her mother in her life. She's orphaned, and you're just going to be like, all right, well, I gave you this room in the attic, even though I live in this giant mansion with like 8 other rooms, but I don't want to hear the pitter patter of your little feet. And I was like, man, Aunt Polly is heartless. In terms of the plot itself, I liked her relationship with Mr. Pendleton and how she breaks down this grumpy old man and what's revealed in her relationship with him. My least favorite part, though, would be the end, not because of what happens, but because to me it kind of just came out of nowhere, much like the car that hit her. It just, oh, there it is in the middle of this chapter, like, and now she's paralyzed. I found that a bit abrupt, and we'll get into how the movie handles it, but I have some thoughts there.
Yeah, in the novel, to be honest, I didn't have a favorite character in the novel. I found them all to be so flawed and just at times so annoying. And I understand Nancy, is a very sympathetic character, but her dialogue was obnoxious.
I think it was supposed to be an Irish brogue or something.
Oh man, I was like, I don't know what she was. It repeated a lot, and then Porter kind of did this thing that I guess was a very stylized thing back in the day, and that wrote in the dialect. So like, I would have to like read the sentence out loud to kind of try to gather what she was trying to say. Anyways, Pollyanna, love her, but again, obnoxious in the book. I mean, just like the kind of little kid that I'd be like, you need to get away from me. But that's it. I mean, I don't want to be too harsh on her, but it was just like, I did enjoy the story. I will agree with you. Getting hit by the car, flabbergasted. Because I don't remember anything about the movie when I was reading the book. So out of nowhere, it's just, there's a car. It kind of perked me up because really nothing else was happening in the story. It's a very kind of slow moving book for only being less than 200 pages. So the car part I thought was kind of great because I was like, oh, finally some action. But even that wasn't as action-packed as I had hoped.
Yeah, same. I would say my least favorite part is probably that, because with my brief memories of the movie, I knew something was going to happen to Pollyanna, and I was expecting it to get its own chapter in a way and have a bigger buildup and not go from one paragraph, her like delivering the calf's foot jelly, and then the next paragraph, oh, and then she was hit by a car. Came out of nowhere. But for me, favorite character, having to pick one, I think I'm going to say Mr. Pendleton. I think he had one of the better character arches because it actually grew throughout the book. I think his was more complete. We saw him going from being angry and bitter and meh, and hearing about his backstory with learning about her, his love for Pollyanna's mother, and then him finally adopting Jimmy. I just really thought he had a more complete character arch that wasn't abrupt in any way throughout the story. So I really enjoyed when she would visit him and her interactions with him in the book. Favorite part, I did like the times too when she was hanging out with Jimmy. He's very different in the film. Jimmy in the book is, I think, a little more rough and tough, and I thought he was funny. He's kind of that little scrappy guy. I'm gonna work. Make sure I don't want no charity. Make sure whoever takes me in knows that I'll work for my living. I'm like, you're 10, sweetie. It's okay.
I got like a Tom Sawyer vibe from him, or like Huckleberry Finn. He'd fit right in with them.
That's a good comparison. That's a very good comparison. So I liked her interactions with him as well. I don't know if I could say anything from the book particularly stood out as a scene, but those interactions I think would be my favorite when she was with Jimmy or Mr. Pendleton.
Yeah, I found it interesting at the end as people are kind of coming to Aunt Polly and sharing like, oh, please tell her that I played the glad game and this happened. We get a bunch of rando characters. I was like, who are these people? Like, there's a woman and she was about to break up with her husband, but they played the glad game and now they're not getting divorced. And I was like, where did you come from?
Pollyanna, licensed therapist right there. Just saving people's lives.
She was. Well, even with all of these different characters and their intermingling, we did have a bit of a mystery quote with Aunt Polly. She does have a heart, and by the end, she comes around not only to Pollyanna, but her rumored lover and her mysterious lover. Was anyone surprised by this reveal? I kind of saw it coming from a mile away, but what about you guys?
I didn't really think anything was a big surprise in this movie or book, except for the car hitting her. That was the only thing that seemed to come out of nowhere. I did love how Aunt Polly is like revealed to be like this old spinster, and then I think early in the book it says she's just turned 40, and I'm like, oh my gosh, just turned 40, and she's like this old decrepit boy. I was thinking she was like 65 the way they were like talking about her. So you know, I'm happy she found happiness.
Also abruptly.
Yeah, also abruptly. I wasn't surprised per se. I did think at first when they brought up Pendleton, I was like, oh, okay, there's something there. But as soon as it was revealed that it wasn't him, I was like, oh yeah, that would have been too easy. There had to be a third person to actually make this a triangle of some sort. So I kind of liked that twist, and I wish the movie used it a little bit. I think that would have been they could have had some really good gags in there of them trying to like actively avoid each other or something, but everyone has the wrong impression. They think they were the lovers, but really it wasn't. But I was a little disappointed that by the time we finally have Pendleton and Chilton talking, and I was like, yes, we're going to find out what the feud was, what went down. And Chilton just goes, who remembers anymore what lovers' quarrels are about? I'm like, damn it. I wish we knew. Like, come on. I wanted the gossip. I wanted the soap opera. So that I found a little disappointing that we were building to that moment. And then it was just, no one remembers anymore. And then you're right. As soon as Pollyanna is injured, suddenly she wakes up and Aunt Polly's like, by the way, you have an uncle.
Surprise.
When did you reconcile? When did you talk it out? What was the problem? The film, I think, does it, we'll talk about a little bit smoother, but it's still abrupt even in the film.
Yeah, I actually liked the Pendleton reveal better, which is absent from the film. He actually has a different name. He's Mr. Pendergast, but it's essentially a similar character. But in the book here, Mr. Pendleton is the old man that I referenced. But early on, we learned that Aunt Polly has never met Pollyanna because her mother, Aunt Polly's sister, basically was supposed to marry, I believe so, was supposed to marry a man within the town who was well established, but somewhat older, and she didn't want to do that. So she ran away with Pollyanna's, what became her father, the minister, and that was kind of looked down upon on the family. And then it's later revealed that Mr. Pendleton was Jenny's intended betrothed husband. And I was like, ooh, that was a fun little twist. He actually then wants Pollyanna to move in with him and like kind of become his heir, and you see her love for Aunt Polly in that regard. But it's supposed to throw you off, and you think that he was this referenced Aunt Polly's lover who lives in the town. But I knew that it wasn't going to be that, just because I was like, oh, they're introducing this too early. But I liked the reveal regarding her mother.
Do you think, I always wonder these things when I'm reading, and like the abruptness of the reveal, and then also like the who remembers kind of line. Do you think that was a choice made by the author because she was running out of time, she was running out of pages? Because to me, I mean, that just seems like such, for lack of a better word, lazy storytelling. Just to be like, who cares? You know, it's like, well, you've built us to care. So why are you not exploring this more? You've taken us on this journey of a lover's quarrel, a triangle, and then, we're not going to give you the details. I don't know. It's just weird to me.
I think it might be because it was written with children in mind. Like maybe they're like, we don't really need to get into that. Whereas we're reading it as adults. So we're like, no, I want to know the juicy details of what went down between these two and why they're not on speaking terms. But I think that subplot would not have been something that interested me as a little girl. Maybe I'd be like, okay, cool, she has an uncle. Like,
well, you could read my fan fiction now, Pollyanna After Dark.
Fine. So there's got to be answers in there.
Although I would be curious, like, given that we all want the more gossipy side of this, maybe she had a fight with her publisher. Maybe she had a full-on, fleshed-out story, and the publisher was like, it's only 1913. We can't say these things, and like took it out. Who knows? Maybe there's something in there, because we discovered that with 20,000 Leagues that, publishers, authors tend to be sometimes at the forefront of some things, and then your publishers go, it'll never sell if you leave this in here and take it out. So maybe there was something like that. But that's a great question, Jeremy. Who knows why that didn't make it in there?
Do you have a theory?
I think it has to do more with publishing than what we probably think. And I think it maybe even had to do with the length of the book. Like, I know publishers can be very strict sometimes. Like, it has to be 40,000 words and not one over kind of a thing. So maybe, who knows, though? We will never know.
That could be also why, though, the book, I felt like there was a good thread of adventures that linked together. That there wasn't a strong plot per se, other than that Pollyanna's purpose is to kind of bring this town together. But it was moving along nicely. I felt like everything did lead one into the other. And then out of nowhere, she gets hurt. All these other characters come out. Polly gets married, and boom, she's walking again. In like 25 pages when we had 150 pages of all this character development. So maybe it is a issue of time and length, like you said, that out of nowhere she's like, well, we got to wrap this up and get it out there.
I did appreciate the length and the episodic structure. I found it easy to get through. It actually, as I've shared, this was my first time reading it, but it reminded me of books that my parents would read to me when I was younger, like still young enough to be read to at bedtime, but maybe past like picture book phase, like maybe like first or second grade. I remember my dad read me chapters of Stuart Little each night. Like, it took us a few nights to get through that book, which would be, I think, around a contemporary of Pollyanna. And then my mom read me Tuck Everlasting. And reading this book made me think of this would be a good one to read to a kid. Like, easy to just be like, oh, here's this episode with Mrs. Snow, and we're done for the night. All right, we'll pick back up with this next scene. Like, they are these little isolated incidents.
So why do you think Disney wanted to make this story into a film?
So we're going to dive into the film, but after watching it, it just screams Disney. The whole way listening to it, and as soon as I read in my research that Eleanor Porter loved her hometown, I just felt like Walt very, very easily, I think, attached to this idea of a small American town, happiness, children, bringing people together. It just screams Disney to me.
Yeah, I can agree with that. It is very, very much the perfect film for that era. You mentioned earlier your grandmother watched this film on like a loop of like 6 different films, and it made me think of my Aunt Willette, who also loved those kind of grand films from the 50s and 60s that portrayed like the Edwardian and Victorian era or turn of the century. But yeah, I feel like Walt probably really identified with this film because it is set in a small town and it has a very moral story of positivity, which, when you think about the Disney company, it's really what it is. It's a very Pollyanna company at its heart. So I'm sure it appealed to him, especially having daughters. I imagine they might have read the novel or at least been familiar with the novel. And also, like I said, it's very reminiscent of other orphan little girls during this, stories about orphan little girls during this time. So I'm sure he was like, well, if Pippi Longstocking's doing well, or, I don't know, Madeline or whatever the rest of them were, maybe I ought to get my finger in that pie.
I never thought of how many orphan girls there were. Orphan girl stories.
It's like an orphan girl extended universe.
They all know each other.
She has help, and they all just land in a battle with Thanos. No, too far off track. But for me, Jeremy, I think you raised a good point of Walt's hometown and everything. Like, this has a very Main Street feel to it, and we're looking back on it now more than 100 years later, but we have to think like Walt lived through this time. So actually, I'll use this as my segue into our history. As I was preparing the notes for this episode, it occurred to me that unlike our other 2 classics in this summer series, this book was actually published in Walt Disney's lifetime. In fact, Pollyanna herself would be around Walt's age at the time, given its publication in 1913 as contemporary children's fiction. It's likely the book was something of Walt's younger sister might have enjoyed. It's interesting you brought up his daughters as well. I unfortunately didn't come across any references to this, like Walt sharing his family's love of other classics, like their fondness for Mary Poppins. But I think regardless of how he came across the text, this film continued a common tradition in the company of adapting literature into the live action medium, which was the main output of the studio for several decades. So Pollyanna rang in a new decade with its release on May 19th, 1960, which means the film is celebrating its 60th Pollyanna-versary, as cleverly coined by the Disney D23 fan club. The film, written and directed by David Swift, features an all-star cast with big names even for Walt Disney Productions. Fans of classic cinema will recognize Jane Wyman as Aunt Polly, Richard Egan as Dr. Edmund Chilton, Carl Malden as Reverend Paul Ford, Agnes Moorehead as Mrs. Snow, Nancy Olson as Nancy Furman, and Adolphe Manjou as Mr. Pendergast. However, the film is perhaps best known for introducing American audiences to its star, Haley Mills. Pollyanna marks the first of several Disney films for Ms. Mills, easily sending her on the path to her Disney legend status bestowed in 1998. For Pollyanna, she won an Academy Award for the now defunct category of Most Outstanding Juvenile Performance. Interestingly, as we've kind of alluded to, the book is known for its saccharine tone, and writer-director Swift actively tried to tone that down when constructing the Disney adaptation. In a 1959 New York Times article unsubtly titled "New Pollyanna Will Be Subtle," he's quoted as saying, quote, "In the book, Pollyanna was so filled with happiness and light that I wanted to kick her. Now she is shy. We have an adult drag advice out of her instead of making her the glad girl of the book. We've simmered her cheerfulness down to merely emphasize the things could be worse attitude," end quote. Despite some of these changes, the film, much like the book, remains beloved by families today. However, I did uncover that this is not Disney's only adaptation. Disney later adapted it again in 1989 in a made-for-television musical called simply Polly. This version stars Keisha Knight Pullman in the Pollyanna role and Felicia Rashad as Aunt Polly, with a predominantly black cast. It was followed in 1990 with a sequel, Polly Comin' Home, where both actresses reprised their roles. I'd love to see that added to Disney Plus too, though I would not be surprised to learn if friends of the podcast, Aaron or Albert, owned a copy. But we were unfortunately only able to focus on the Hillary Mills version, so I'd love to know what all of you thought of the film. Jeremy, do you want to kick us off?
Well, I remember seeing the Polly and Polly Coming Home DVDs on the Disney Movie Rewards Club website back. You guys remember that, like 5, 6, 7 years ago?
Yeah, I think it's still a thing. I get targeted ads.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, I'm talking about the one when you bought a DVD and you got the points. I think that one's defunct.
No, that I still have points.
Really?
I gotta cash them in. Maybe I can get it.
Yeah, I guess it's been a while since I've actually bought a DVD. But yeah, so it's funny you say that because I distinctly remember seeing that going, I don't know what this is. And now I do. I enjoyed the film way more than I enjoyed the book. And I think it's because, as you mentioned, they toned Pollyanna down. Because in the book, she comes across as borderline rude. And sometimes the way that she just actively interjects, like, I don't care how you feel, this is how you should feel. At least that's the way I interpreted it. Where in the book, I think by giving her a little reservation, she's a much more empathetic character. Like, you can kind of see the wheels turning in her head more as she understands the situation, but now she's going to be positive in spite of that, rather than just blindly optimistic, which I know, the author pointed out was not the case, but that's how she comes across in the book. And clearly we're not the only ones that think that. If she had to make a statement about it, that's clearly a known thing, I guess. But I found the film to be long. I couldn't believe it was over 2 hours long. Haley Mills, genius, wonderful performance. Jane Wyman, I thought was excellent. Her character was toned down as well. She didn't come across as just such like an evil person. I love adding more housekeepers into the mix because I feel like it gave them more personality than just having Nancy. And the one really mean one, I thought that was great as well. Couple choices
Angie.
that I thought that was her name? Angie?
Is that Angie? I think so.
The sassy one. She makes faces. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was great.
One choice that I thought was very strange is when they go to the church and we literally get like a 10-minute sermon in the middle of the film, and it keeps going and going and going. I was like, wow, this is not just like, oh, we want to give you a little taste of the sermon. This is the whole sermon. And what an interesting choice. I don't think that would ever fly today.
Before I jump into my take, I thought the same thing. I thought that was so interesting. And I kind of wished I watched it on a Saturday because that might have fulfilled my obligation to go to Mass on Sunday. But
check.
Check the box. But I think that was to drive home a big change, and we're going to talk about changes, is Aunt Polly's stance in the town, which is named for her family, and she's basically the unelected mayor. I think they were really trying to drive home that she even had the power to tell the Reverend what she thinks he should be preaching about. I agree that maybe it didn't have to be that long, but it made, I think, that contrasting difference with his sermon at the end very well. But yeah, that was a big one for me too. I was a little surprised by that. Overall, I really enjoyed the film. Some key scenes came back to me watching them in my grandmother's living room. The prisms stand out to me the most. Those I remembered going into reading this book and watching this film. I remember the rainbows and the prisms. So that was really nice. I did also enjoy the film. I think there were some things that the book did a little bit better. Like we said, that plot twist with the love triangle thing. But I also kind of enjoyed, I thought the film connected the characters to each other a little bit better. We got more time and interactions with Pollyanna and her aunt that we don't see in the book, that I thought that relationship then really fleshed out a little bit more. So I really enjoyed the film. And I didn't realize going to this, that was Haley Mills' first film, because I think I grew up
First
watching,
American.
Yes, first American film. Her second film, they found her from Tiger.
She did a film with her father, John Mills, so that's how Walt found her. But yeah, it, for all intents and purposes, her first film here for
her first
audiences.
Disney film.
Yeah,
I didn't realize it was her first Disney film because I always watched her Parent Trap. And because I watched Parent Trap first and then Pollyanna as a kid, I always assumed she did Parent Trap first. I never made the connection that it was the other way around. So I got to watch that fresh. And did anyone else realize she was a teenager doing this? She was 14, 15 years old.
I didn't realize that. I just assumed she was 11, like her.
No, she was 14 or 15.
Wow,
that's how interesting.
For me, this was actually my third attempt watching it. But I'll tell the story. I think we alluded to this on the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea episode. I was staying at Disney's Polynesian Resort, and they had DVDs available. And Doug and I, maybe like 2 years ago, kind of recognized, like, we really haven't seen a lot of these live action films. We're not as well versed in it. I think I remember seeing like a preview for live action films on DVD or probably VHS at the time, like where it was like a mashup of like Pollyanna, Old Yeller, The Parent Trap, just like classic scenes. So I was aware of it, but I was like, I've never seen this. So we went to the DVD booklet at the Polynesian desk, and we grabbed the Pollyanna disc. There was only one, and I put it in, and it was the special features disc, like from the 2-disc special edition. I was like, well, this isn't helpful because I haven't seen the movie and there's no way to play it. And I like go to the front desk and I'm like, do you have another disc? They're like, no, nobody's ever told us this was the wrong disc. I guess nobody checks it out. So we told the story to our friend and a coworker that Doug and I shared at Disney at one point. She was like, oh my gosh, you haven't seen it. I have it on DVD. You can borrow it for the weekend. And this is not a reflection on Pollyanna, but I am notorious for, we put on a movie, and if my head is like on the side cushion on the couch, like I'm out, I'm gone. It can be a great movie, but I probably made it an hour in. But as Jeremy said, it's a pretty long movie. And I remember like I woke up and it must have just ended because, you know, like the credits were rolling and I was like, what did I miss? And of course I know nothing of the story, and Doug's like, well, she was paralyzed. And I'm like, wait, what? And he's like, the town, they all come together to help her. And I was like, gosh, I guess I missed quite a bit. So I knew a bit of the story going in, but I was able to sit down, stay awake, and watch it this time. But I think I'm in the minority here. I wish I had actually watched the film the first time all the way through those 2 years ago, because I think I suffered from this go round reading the book first and then watching the film in its completion. And I'm not a book purist, but there were just so many changes that I almost found it distracting, maybe because I was going to be prepared to talk about them, that it kind of took away from the film for me. So I'd say the film itself is a fun film, definitely a family classic. It has things that I think it does well, but then in comparing it to the book, I suffered a little.
So this will be interesting because we always ask this question when we compare original text to the Disney adaptation. Did you feel that it upheld the integrity of the original story.
I would absolutely say the integrity's there, and that's what's so interesting here. It's not a beat for beat, retelling of what's in the book. We'll get into those differences but if you're just going to talk about the integrity of like a little girl with an optimistic attitude who brings this town together, I think it excels in that regard, and it does take different mediums to kind of show her impact on the town, and I think those are successful. So if we're just talking about like any morals of the book, like, yes, the film works in that regard.
Yeah, the overall theme of the book and the movie is very apparent, and I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier. It's not necessarily an intrinsic sort of book where we're diving into different directions and different morals and different ambiguities, if you would. Like, it's like you said, it's a girl who brings happiness to a town, and so at that level, it is a success, and it is true to its source material, but it does change quite a bit.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think overall, there's enough there that I think is the same. And I think something that we noticed from all the books that we've read is things that take pages in a book only take seconds on film. Because I recognized in the film a lot of those small like adventures she goes on, like the prisms. But that was, took a lot of time in the book. But just talking about prisms with Miss Snow takes no time in the film. So they really expanded on that. And have added other adventures. So I think overall they pulled a lot in there. I was surprised that they changed Mr. Pendleton's name to Pendergast. Don't know what motivated that, but I was happy to see that everyone else pretty much kept their names and their primary role from the book as well. So I think a lot of it was just, like you said, the integrity and the structure is there. We've just kind of moved it in the Disney direction.
So what were some of the other major differences and pluses that were added to the story that differ from the book?
So Jeremy, I did this with my last one, and since we actually have video, you can see this. I watch these videos I go old school with, I do the teacher Venn diagram, and there are so many different things.
Are you also the Zodiac killer? Because that's what that looks like.
No, but I'm like Courtney too, where like, I will zone out in a film. So if I know I need to sit there, I had to have something in my hand, like writing things down just to like keep with it. I'm very much like my students in the classroom. I fidget. So I'm not always fun to watch movies with, but lots and lots of things. The two I'm going to pull out, because I'm sure we're going to talk about a lot of them, is the two big differences for me was the role of Aunt Polly in the town. I loved the town politics. I thought that was so intriguing and kind of fun. It helped move some of the story along. And then also the bazaar, the town bazaar, like that is completely Disney fabricated. Or both those things are completely Disney fabricated that were not part of linked to the book at all. So I thought those were two of the major differences. In some ways, I guess it plussed it. I think it helped move the story forward and make it a little less episodic, that there was a drive in this town the whole time to move power away from Aunt Polly to themselves. So in some ways, I think that plussed it and brought the characters together in different ways and had them interact with each other outside of just talking to Pollyanna when she happened to visit their house. So for me, I think those were some pluses.
I think the actors that they hired for these roles really brought a lot to those characters in terms of their personality, their dynamics, kind of fleshing them out. I am going to complain that I think the movie is too long, whereas we've talked about this in this summer cinema series. I feel like, 20,000 Leagues is a bit of a long book. It condenses it down to like a 2-hour and 5-minute movie, but it's very well paced. And I feel like Treasure Island is super tight. Like it's like an hour and 37 minutes. This is just my personal soapbox. Movies don't need to be more than 2 hours long. Like give me an hour and 45 minutes and I'm good. So I felt like some of the things they did it just dragged it out a bit for me. But I think one of the stronger pluses is in relation to something that we were joking about earlier in regards to the book and how they handled Pollyanna's accident. The car thing is very much out of nowhere. And it's funny, when I was reading the book, I remembered what I just referenced, me waking up on the couch and Doug being like, she was paralyzed. I was like, how did it happen? He's like, she fell out of a tree. So the whole time I'm reading the book, I think she's going to fall out of a tree. And I almost thought it was foreshadowing. Early on in the book, she like climbs out the tree by her window. And I was like, uh-oh, that's going to come back later. It didn't, because it was a car that hit her. But in the movie, I think it makes more sense. It sets up this idea that Pollyanna wanted a doll, the crutches. That's the basis of the Glad game. At this bazaar that you referenced, she plays kind of like a fish and wish game, and they make sure that she gets her doll. But because Aunt Polly is running the town, Pollyanna had to sneak out to go to this bazaar fair type thing. So she does climb that tree out of her window like in the book, but she climbs back up to get into her window since Aunt Polly's still awake and she can't go in the front door. And she's almost in her window, and she almost loses the dolly, and it's in reaching for that doll that she falls and breaks her leg. And I just felt like that was this sounds horrible, like a better way to get us to that conflict.
Yeah, obviously the biggest difference I noticed would be the way she's paralyzed. And it made me just wonder, like, if getting hit by a car in late 50s cinema was just not feasible as far as filming goes. But yeah, overall, I think the falling out of the tree makes a little more sense. And it also makes the character a little more empathetic, because she had to do that because of Aunt Polly. And so it kind of makes you dislike Aunt Polly, or at least, have that conflict. Whereas getting hit by a car is just so random.
Yeah, I feel like that'd be also just pretty graphic for Disney. Though I don't know, when she falls out of the tree, the way that her leg is bent, I was like, oh, that doesn't look
I texted
good.
you, Courtney, when I was watching it. I was like, oh my God, she looks like she looks like Sally.
Yes, in Nightmare Before Christmas.
Tower. Yeah. Looks like a rag doll just laying in and then when Aunt Polly goes back and picks up the doll and the doll is equally like bent and twisted, I'm like, oh, that's so graphic.
Somebody should re-edit that as like a horror film. Like
they did it with Mary Poppins. They could do it.
Yeah.
Aunt Polly.
But do you guys do this? Maybe you do. Maybe I'm just a weirdo. Do you ever read a book and you have the character's like voice in your head, and then when you hear it on film, you're like, that's not what I heard?
Yes, I feel like as a kid reading Harry Potter, like,
okay,
the books came out before the movies, and so from what I read in Harry Potter, like, I guess I read maybe 1 through 3 before the first film came out. I was like, oh, I had a totally different vision of this in my head. Who was it for you?
Yeah, so like for me, Pollyanna's voice was because she came from out west in the book, and it was very much like Pippi Longstocking, or Applejack from My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic, if anybody's a My Little Pony fan. Just like I read it very country, and then when Haley Mills shows up and she's very proper, I was like, whoa, what is this?
I like that they tried to explain that away, because she is a British actress, and so they changed. And you're right, in the book, her missionary family is from out west, and instead they're like, she's from the British West Indies. And I was like, oh, is that what we're going with to cover up that accent?
I mean, it's a very minute change, but
no, you're right.
And it has nothing to do with the literature per se, but it's just jarring in my brain to be like, that's not the Pollyanna I think that's pictured in my mind.
A great point.
Could I get your guys' opinion? What did you think of the Aunt Polly, Dr. Chilton in the movie, since they got rid of that plot twist from the book? What did you guys think of that relationship?
I mean, I found it, again, very predictable. Like, who else is she going to end up with in that town? Because isn't the only other male that's really predominantly featured is the minister, and he's married, right?
Yeah. Well, then there's the rando love interest for Nancy that is very underdeveloped and unexplained. Yeah. George. And I remembered that from before I fell asleep the first time watching it. I was like, oh, I think like Nancy has a beau, but Aunt Polly doesn't approve, and that's a thing. And then I'm reading the book and I was like, oh, that's not a thing, I guess. I feel like that, yeah, like that didn't go anywhere really. Like he helps with the bazaar, but I was like, this feels unresolved.
I want to know his past.
Yeah, what's up with George? I'm
Pollyanna After Dark. That's where it's the
fan fiction. We got to track it down. I'm curious though. You kind of alluded to this, Jeremy, in your confession of no favorite characters from the book. What is everyone's favorite characters from the film, and did that differ from the novel for you?
Oh, I mean, Pollyanna is way better in the movie than in the book, in my opinion. But my favorite character in the movie is Aunt Polly. And I think it's because she turns from, in the book, being just a raging, heartless witch to a strong, powerful woman who is flawed. And she's very likable even when she's unlikable. Like, you kind of can see why she is the way she is. In the book, you never really understand why she's so angry. I mean, she's got everything that we, value per se. She's got money, she's got prestige, she's got power. So why are you so angry? I mean, she's looking for love, sure, but at least in the movie, I feel like there's some motivation behind why she wants to maintain her facade, if you would. And I just liked her a lot. And then to see the character grow and find happiness is also fun.
I have to agree. I think I really like the Pollyanna and Aunt Polly dynamic a lot. Because in the book, we don't get a lot of interactions between the two of them at all. And that's why like Aunt Polly seems so standoffish. But we do see her interact with her niece a lot more in the book. And I think seeing more of Aunt Polly, since the book, we only see through Pollyanna's eyes. So when she's out with Jimmy or visiting Miss Snow, like we have no idea what Aunt Polly's up to, but we get scenes in the film where Pollyanna isn't present, so we do get to see Aunt Polly a little more. So I'd have to agree. I mean, I loved Haley Mills a lot in this, so I'm going to lean on Pollyanna maybe a little more than Aunt Polly. But I really liked that character dynamic more in the film, whereas I liked Pollyanna's character interacting with others in the book.
For me, it's not really a shift in favorite, but just what I want to appreciate here in the film. This is my glad game, I guess, finding my positives in the film. I think Carl Malden gives a really strong performance as the Reverend in this. The scene in the book with the Reverend is really just she kind of comes upon him and helps him with his sermon, but that becomes far more developed here. There's a bit of conflict between Aunt Polly, the church, and like the church not preaching towards the way that she wants to see. I just think Carl Malden's an excellent actor. This is an all-star cast, but I'm probably most familiar with his work in Streetcar Named Desire or On the Waterfront, or as Emily reminded me, Gypsy. So it was fun to see him in this film, and I think he does a great job in that role. So he's not my favorite character, but I want to give him kudos, and kudos to that role for being a little more developed.
Yeah, they really pulled out his character. The church did play a central focus in trying to break Aunt Polly in a way. I thought that was very profound when Pollyanna says no one owns a church, and I thought that was very interesting. And that conflict of when he won't take a side, and they're like, Pollyanna was wrong. I was like, ooh, we're going there. It was very, very political for a 1960s film. I mean, it is the 1960s, but to go the religion route in a way was very unexpected.
Yeah, I liked that as a moral conflict within the film. Like, you see that the Reverend's like a little tortured. Like, do I continue to bend to Aunt Polly's will, or do I stand up for this town and the great things that they can do by holding this bazaar? So I think that's a strong moment that comes from the writer of the film that is absolutely nowhere within the book.
I think it could also be interesting to think about making this film in the 1960s taking that moral conflict versus the where do we send our money to help orphans overseas. Like you quoted earlier, Jeremy, you said the reverend in your town, do we help a Black child across the sea versus the one across the street? I wonder if that was a decision on Disney's part in the times that they chose to go with a different moral conflict for the town to grapple with than what was in the book.
For sure. So as mentioned, this is the 60th anniversary of the release of this film. It was released in 1960. And Haley Mills, who is still alive and well with us, and we send her all our good wishes. She did an interview earlier this summer for with D23, and she talked about this film. So did you get to see it? And what were some of your takeaways, Courtney?
First of all, Haley Mills looks amazing for 74, and I want to know what skincare regimen she uses. But I really enjoyed this interview. I liked that it was focused around the concept of a Pollyanna-versary. It's easy to find on YouTube. It was kind of a live Zoom event back in April, as we've probably seen a lot of in these quarantimes, as I like to call them. But she talks not only about Pollyanna, but her long career with Disney. In terms of Pollyanna specifically, though, I thought the story about her shooting the scene with the Reverend was really cute. That was actually her first scene that she shot, and she talks about how she was really hungry, and there was these donuts at craft services, and they don't have those in England apparently, and so she was just really wanted to get through the scene to get her donut, and I thought that was absolutely precious that stuck with her for 60 years. They must have been really good donuts.
They were from Voodoo Donut, actually.
I
think
okay.
Is where they were from. Yeah, it was nice to see a child star who still has positive things to say about their early career, because you don't really find that anymore, unfortunately. A lot of people who started in the industry so young usually have really bad experiences, and if they ever talk about it, it's through the lens of therapy. So it was nice to see her still have a fondness for this film. And yeah, absolutely, great career. You talk about your first exposure to her being what's the film? You
Parent
just said
Trap?
Parent Trap.
Thank you. I had a brain cramp. My first exposure to her that I can remember is Good Morning, Miss Bliss from the late 80s, which turned into Saved by the Bell. So to kind of connect, I remember, as a teenager, to connect that was, the same girl who was in all these films. And then, of course, you think she's just a Hollywood icon at that point because she's been in everything you've seen. So, yeah, it's a good, fun little interview.
I really enjoyed how she talked about Walt. Maybe just because, anytime now that anyone's alive still that says that they've worked directly with Walt Disney is just amazing to me. But I also find it super reassuring as more people share those stories that they're like, no, Walt really was just a great person to work with. It makes you feel better that like one of your heroes like is a real genuine person. And I really like something that she said at the end, that Walt wanted to make films that bring out the good in people. And she said she really felt that working on the Disney lot, that Walt wanted to make films that you're going to leave the theater feeling good about yourself as well. And I just thought that was really sweet, and that she takes that away from her time at Disney and working and viewing Disney films herself.
Completely unrelated to Disney, but I liked when she was like, yeah, we had a puppy. Laurence Olivier gave it to Vivian Lee, and then Vivian Lee gave us the puppy. And I'm just sitting here like, oh, so casual. Then we took the puppy to meet Walt Disney because my mom said we should do that. As one does.
I never really connected also the realm of work that her parents were involved in. Like, you just never connect sometimes child actors and actresses with like their parents in the industry sometimes. And I was just like, oh, wow. Yeah. Because that was a great question when they asked her, did she ever realize all these people she was working with on Pollyanna? And she said, well, I kind of did because my parents have been doing this for years.
I made fun of it when we were watching. So Jesse Malton, I believe, asked that question, like, "Oh, did you realize you were working with?" I was like, "She had Vivian Lee's puppy." Like, no, she wasn't connected to these people at all. Sorry, Vivian Lee and Carl Malden were in A Streetcar Named Desire together.
But yeah, it's such a great interview though, and it was kind of fun to see her in her home in a way, like just being so relaxed and so real. Because I can only imagine trying to stage that interview not during a pandemic. She would have been on a stage at D23 set up and probably surrounded with like artwork and things from the film or something, or on Main Street itself.
Yeah,
who knows?
That'd be fun. Well, speaking of Main Street, we've in this series kind of found our ties to the parks. Not many here, but I'm going to toss it over to you, Emily, since you're the one who did the homework and found our slim references to Pollyanna in the parks.
So I found 3. This was tough. I thought long and hard, and I really thought there had to have been a song on Main Street that came from the film. No, even something from the score. I looked up any possible article I could find that listed like what songs play on Main Street USA and Disney and Disneyland, and none were credited to Pollyanna. So all I found was in Main Street train station in Walt Disney World, on the train bulletin, there is a train going to Harrington Hills, which is a reference to Aunt Polly's name and her town in the film. It's a different town in the book, and it's marked as on time. So that's the only reference in the domestic parks I was able to find. In Disneyland Paris, on their Main Street, there's a Harrington's Fine China and Porcelains, and that is a reference to the name again. And then between 1992 and 2002, number 76 on their town square was occupied by Dr. Chilton's Pharmacy, which references Aunt Polly's love interest. And then it became part of their town square photography before turning into the new Flora's Unique Boutique in 2014. So there used to be some references in Disneyland Paris. And then to promote the film in the 1960s, I mentioned that quote that in the film they attribute it to Abraham Lincoln. The quote says, "When you look for the bad in mankind, expecting to find it, you surely will." That was written on Pollyanna's locket. So when she's having that great scene with the pastor, the scene is from the book. She asks the minister, "Are you glad to be a minister?" And he asks her about her father's experience, and she pulls out that quote about how her father approached his ministry, and that moves the pastor. So that being a nice prop from the film, Disney produced thousands of them to sell in the parks. And they sold a bunch of them, not just the parks, I guess all over. And there's a story that the director was out with his family and found it in a store and immediately calls the studio and says, the quote is from the book, or like he rewrote the quote. As I mentioned before, he changed the wording. Abraham Lincoln never said it. It's unattributed in the book. And they had to recall all of these lockets. But according to an article in D23, they weren't able to get all of them. So there's about a couple hundred still out there in the world. They were able to acquire one for the archives, so they do have one. I think it was during another Pollyanna-versary in the early 2000s. Someone was able to say, "Oh, I have one," when D23 and or they were doing the archives was doing something for the anniversary. So the archives has one, but there are still some out there. So if you see one, that is a rare artifact of Disney merchandise, so grab it while you can. And that's all I've been able to find. She's really not in the park. So I'm going to pose this question to you guys. Jeremy, you guys do this a lot on the Mad Chatters. If you had to put Pollyanna into the parks, how would you want to see it done?
Well, I think we could put that quote into Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, and then it would come from Lincoln then. So.
Loophole solved.
There you
exactly.
go.
This is one of those films that I just don't know if they need any representation in the parks, because nothing in the film really jumps out as I want to experience that. So my thought was, instead of taking it into the park per se, I think this film is actually really a good one that could be remade today. Kind of a modern take, in the same way that Parent Trap has been remade, and updated per se. And even, let's make it even better. Let's get Lindsay Lohan to star in it. She's going to play an 11-year-old girl, and
tradition.
Yeah, and then
Lindsay Lohan taking over Haley Mills.
Yeah, and I want her to play it as, like a 30-year-old woman as an 11-year-old, and nobody questions it. But no, but like we talked about earlier, kind of the moral of the movie, I think is still relevant. It just needs to be modernized. So I think you could do like a fun adaptation of this in some way.
Yeah, there's not like that iconic scene where you're watching a movie and you're like, ooh, that would be a fun Disney ride. I'm still holding out for the Kronk and Yzma coaster when they pull their lever in Emperor's New Groove. So for this one, when you pose the question, I could see it more as like a limited time magic concept where they do something temporary. I could see, if they were to celebrate this Pollyanna-versary in the parks, maybe like for a week or a weekend, it'd be fun to host a bazaar on Main Street, much like they did in the film, since I think that is one of the more unique things to the film versus the book and the iconic scene. It gives me a very like Music Man vibe. I just feel like it would fit right in on Main Street USA. Have some games that you can play with tickets and small prizes, maybe themed to Pollyanna. I think that would be a fun way to pay homage to the film, but it doesn't need to be something permanent. What was your idea, Emily?
I really struggled as well, but I liked what Disneyland Paris had, whereas when you make those Main Street windows, or you just have those kind of random, or like the sounds you hear out of the windows on Main Street, it could be a conversation between Aunt Polly and Pollyanna that you recognize from the film just coming out of the windows, or a reference to like how they had Dr. Chilton's Pharmacy on the windows or somewhere on Main Street, or just within the Emporium, maybe those different posters or things they have. Or is there still a telephone in Main Street in the Emporium that you can pick up and hear the party line? Is that still a thing?
The hat shop? It's been a while since I've been in there, but when I was there recently, it worked. So
even hopefully something like that, where if you pick that up, if you know the
little
film,
Easter
egg. There's a conversation from the party line. Hopefully one of you can confirm that the train station still has Harrington Hills on there somewhere, because I think that's kind of fun since she comes in on a train. I'm sure Walt loved filming those scenes on the train.
Walt loved
so I thought that
trains.
was kind of nice.
We probably will get maybe like a cupcake with her little hat on it.
There you go. It has a little crystal on the top, and it's a rainbow cupcake.
Yeah, and
the
if you really want
cupcake.
If you really want to experience it, just climb up a tree and I'll throw you out of it, and that'll be the Pollyanna experience.
Oh no, yeah, we don't want to sign anyone up for that. As we close up, though, we always like to leave our listeners with different resources. So Emily, what did you find?
So I added the link in our show notes to the D23 interview with Haley Mills. If you have not had a chance to listen to it, I really think it is charming, and it's great to hear from actors who've worked on a lot of these early live action films. And my other resource is, Jeremy, you recently had your friends from the Disney Buzz on a recent Mad Chatters episode. They too reviewed the film recently, and this week in preparing for the podcast, I also listened to their critiques, and I liked what they had to say. So if you want to continue to hear podcasters have a conversation about Pollyanna, I suggest the Disney Buzz episode from this season.
I'll definitely have to check that out. Surprisingly, I don't have bonus features to talk about. I apparently need to check myself back into the Polynesian and get that special edition disc, because that's the only way I'm going to find them. Usually I've been able to find these on YouTube. I looked up the Vault Disney collection DVD from our, that collection we talked about in our last episode. Pollyanna is one of the titles. That's the disc that I found at the Polynesian. I searched all over YouTube and could not find them. So I'd love to track that down just to see some of those making of features. I do really enjoy them. I'd also like to see those things incorporated to Disney Plus. If you go under extras, there's just like a 1-minute clip of Pollyanna. So would be great to see those expanded. On the reading front, though, I think it would be fun personally to read some of the sequels. Emily, you mentioned Pollyanna grows up, just to see like how does she change? Is she still as saccharine as like she is as a little girl, or does she mature in that regard? So I wouldn't mind that as a easy, fun read.
I was surprised to learn that the town of Littleton, New Hampshire, is that where
Yes.
Miss Porter is from? Yeah, they love her, which is great. I don't know anything about this town except that she's from there. But I did see, they have like the statues that they put up of Eleanor Porter and Pollyanna. And I imagine that if you went and visited, there's probably lots of little Pollyanna things all around the town. So if you really are a big Pollyanna fan, why don't you book a little trip up there? I'm sure that small town New Hampshire would enjoy having you and hosting you.
But anyway, next episode, we hope you'll continue to join with us. We've had a lot of fun this summer reading these literary classics and revisiting them on film. For our next episode, you'll get to take a little break from any reading prep ahead of time. We're excited to share that friend of the podcast, Jim Korkis, will return for another discussion. Jim is going to share a history of books that influenced Walt Disney himself. So you're likely to find some of these references in Jim's Vault of Walt series available from Theme Park Press. And stay tuned for that episode next month.
In the meantime, you can keep up with us on social media. We are at Book of the Mouse on Twitter and Instagram. As always, you can email us with comments or ideas to bookofthemouseclub@gmail.com. Please be sure to leave us a review on iTunes so others can find our podcast and read and listen along with us. If you want to keep up with me, Courtney, or send me hate mail because I thought the book was better than the film of Pollyanna, you can find me on Instagram at GreatGutsby and Twitter at Courtney_Guth.
You can follow me, Emily, on Instagram and Twitter at the same handle, Emily_McD. And Jeremy, where can listeners connect with you and the Mad Chatters?
Hey, the Mad Chatters, we are on all podcast forums, I guess, or wherever you find your podcast, Apple, anything. Also, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Mad Chatters. And if you want to follow me personally, I am at JD Crittenden on Instagram and Twitter as well.
Well, Jeremy, you always out the Mad Chatters episode, so we will let you do the same here. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. And remember, folks, take a little time to find the magic in every day.
Book of the Mouse Club has no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and participants are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent the organizations or companies they happen to work for.